Hello, and thank you once again for tuning in to my podcast, Outside the Box, where I aim to help people see that God is usually always bigger than the boxes that we put Him in, myself included. I like to do this from a different kind of perspectives of like stuff that we go through. Before I started my podcast, I used to do a lot of interviews. We talked about porn, we talked about addiction, we talked about depression, we talked about miscarriage, we talked about raising kids, um, people losing their loved ones. And so there was a lot of topics that I try to cover in this, trying to understand God in the midst of these very, very difficult things that we go through in life, because that's where the problem comes in. Is like when we start going through things, our perspective changes, it shifts. We actually lose our perspective a lot of the time, and because of that we kind of lose sight of God. I mean, it's in the good stuff you can have like a bad perspective too, but the difficulties really come when we start struggling with things, whether they're external or internal or other people or circumstances, and so I like to try to address those things to help people understand that, because I know that one of the things, like when I first became a Christian, you just have these preconceived ideas. I mean, we all have preconceived ideas. Um, and so you just have these preconceived ideas about what it means to be a Christian. And then you start kind of trying to apply them to your Christian walk. And then stuff just doesn't add up. And then people come to these conclusions about how God must be like, or what God must be like because of this. So for example, a lot of people, when they become Christians, they think that they have to be perfect. And you don't. If you were perfect, you wouldn't need to be a Christian anyway, or you wouldn't need Christ to save you anyway, because you're already perfect. And so when you make mistakes and things like that, then you start thinking, okay, what is wrong with me? People might start trying to hide their mistakes because they feel like they shouldn't be making mistakes because they're Christian, or they feel like they shouldn't be tempted by sin anymore. I mean, so we just have a lot of these ideas about what it means to live right and be a Christian. And a lot of times we're wrong. I mean, I'm still learning. I've been a Christian now for almost 20 years, maybe a little bit more, and I'm still learning stuff, still learning that some of the ideas that I have about being a Christian need to be changed, need to be fixed up, and improved upon, because they're not totally correct. And anytime we're operating on a lack of information or misinformation, it just naturally trickles into our decision making process, our behavior being slightly off because of the basis of understanding that we're working with, which is a very good foundation for what I'm going to go into today, which I want to talk about identity. But before I go into that, I just want to let you guys know that you can catch my podcast weekly on Fridays from at 7:30 p.m. I am going to be changing the time. I talked about that the last couple of weeks about changing the time. So I am going to be changing the time to 11 a.m. On Fridays. But so you can catch my podcast moving forward at 11 a.m. on Fridays every week. You can also catch me on, you can download an app on the Google Play Store or the Apple Play Store or the Roku called the Entertainment Theater. And you can also watch my podcast on there, as well as other independent creators. You guys make sure you support that. And, independent creators, we need your support, because you have all these big corporations that control everything, and they make it very difficult for the little people to get in edgewise. Sometimes the people who have much more important messages and things to say, and so a lot of that stuff gets filtered out because of the people at the top that are controlling everything. But when you support indie artists and the platform Entertainment Theater, you make the option of people with the smaller people having a voice in the world, which I think is very, very important. So you guys make sure you go support that. Even if you don't download it to watch my show, just download it to see what else is out there and to support the platform. Um, so yeah, and then you can also make sure you follow, like, and share, subscribe on social media. You can you can follow me on YouTube, X, which is now called Twitter, which is now called X, Instagram, and also Facebook. Make sure you share, subscribe, follow, like my content, because what's the use of making this stuff if it's not getting to the ears and the minds of the people who need to hear it most. And I would appreciate your support for what I'm doing as well. It's not a popular message. It's not something that a lot of people want to hear, but it's definitely needed and it's definitely important. But I need people to support in order to actually get it out there to the people who need it. So thank you in advance for your support, and thanks for tuning in. So yeah, I'm trying to think. Oh, also, I have some courses that are starting coming up this fall. I take a break in the summer. School is just starting. Fall is coming, and so my classes are starting back up. The first one next week is called Everything You Need to Know to Write and Publish a Book. And so if you're interested in taking that course or finding out more about it, I will have the link in the comments under this post. Or somewhere connected to this post in the details, because I think this is going to be on YouTube and Facebook. So anyway, you can find out more about that. You can also look on my page because there's information about it on there as well. And so through that's a 7-session course where I go through from beginning to end how to write and publish a book if you're interested in doing that, and everything you kind of need to know to get that going. It is a tedious process. It's a difficult process. A lot of people are surprised to learn that when they have this great idea to write a book, about how much work actually goes into it. But if you're serious about it and it's something on your heart to do, you definitely want to take this class, because there are not a lot of places that is going to offer you all of this information in one package like this. It took me years to learn all of this information. And so if you want a shortcut, if you want to condense it down and get right to the nitty gritty and cut out the stuff that you're not going to need, you definitely want to take this course. Again, it starts next Thursday, September 14th. I have 2 sessions available, one at 11 a.m. and then the next one at 6:30 p.m. And so you guys make sure you sign up for that, or share this with anybody you know might be interested in writing a book. The price for the course is $75, which is a little bit less than $10 per class. And the knowledge that you get from it is immense. And so make sure you sign up for that if you need it. So now back to the topic that I want to discuss today, which is identity. I want to talk about this because I see a lot of lost people. I like a lot of lost people. Most people are lost. Like I'm lost depending on which day it is. Sometimes, like, you really get lost in all the information in the world that you get, trying to figure out where you fit, where's your place, where do you go, what do you do, things like that. And it's very, very easy to get confused. I think one of the main things that we need to pinpoint in that is that we need an identity. So you would not be looking for an identity if you did not need an identity. And all of us, whether conscious or subconscious, are constantly on a search for identity. And then once we find what we think is our identity, we work towards solidifying that identity and fulfilling whatever it means if we believe that to be our identity. And so this is the underlining thing of everybody's lives, is a search for identity. And then, of course, there are things connected to that, like love, acceptance, and all that type of stuff. But identity is really, really big, because whatever you decide is your identity shapes your life. And so it goes back to, like, before, when I talk about how whatever you believe about yourself, you manifest into your decisions. So we manifest our beliefs into reality. So whatever you believe about yourself, that is what you're going to manifest. So you have those people who think that they are animals. What do? They try to look like an animal. They get plastic surgery. I've seen a person go as far as, like, getting implanted whiskers in their faces, because to them that is a manifestation. They naturally are going to manifest what they believe about themselves, and we do the same thing. And so a lot of times in relationships, when you have problems with people, it's not always the other person, but what you are manifesting in that relationship based on your beliefs. And so sometimes you have to put those in check first and understand what those are first before you can even deal with the relationship problem. Because if that is wrong, then it's going to be difficult to fix the relationship, because now it's functioning on a flawed understanding of who you what you believe. And so it's very complex. Like, life is very, very complex. We, a lot of times, we only scratch the surface of it. But people like me and other people, I say people like me, so I'm not talking about myself. Anyway, we are put here to kind of help people dig under the surface a little bit and not just look at life and take it at face value, because there's much more underneath the surface than what we often pay attention to. So when it comes to identity, it's really, really key, as I said, to how you perceive. So a lot of times people's identities determine if they even reach out for God or not. Because if you see yourself as an independent person who doesn't need anything, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to now rely on God or have this mindset that you should rely on God. Some people are like, I can take care of myself. I don't need to rely on anybody. And then that makes you kind of exclude God, because God wants you to rely on him. And so if you see yourself as a person who is, gay or transgender, and you have been told that God does not accept that, then you're naturally going, especially the Christian God, you're naturally going to gravitate towards that, because you have decided who you are, and that you've been told that that conflicts with that belief. And so you don't even really entertain it. You're like, no, that God is automatically going to reject me. So I'm not going in that direction, because I know who I am. The problem is that we don't know who we are. We were not made in of ourselves. If you ask a cat or a tree or a bug, who are you? They don't know either. We did not make ourselves. So we cannot determine who we are. Now, you can try to find out who you are and seek who you are. And I believe that when you do that, your creator, who knows who you are, who knows what he created you for, will tell you. But a lot of times that's not what we do. We come up with our own ideas about who we are based on our feelings, based on what society tells us about who we are. We try to see where we're fit, and then we decide who we are. And just because you decide who you are does not mean that's who you are, because your creator who made you for a specific person for a specific reason, with specific talents and specific gifts. And those do not change because you decide that you're something else. So, for example, if you, and I might have made the example before, I feel like I use the fork and spoon examples a lot. But if you were created to be a fork, and then you decide that you are a shovel or a pitchfork, but a pitchfork and a regular fork have two different purposes, and you decide that you're a pitchfork, and you start trying to act like a pitchfork and do the thing that pitchfork does, then you start trying to change your makeup to fit a pitchfork. It doesn't change the fact that your original functioning was as a fork, and you're going to run into problems that you would not have run into, and have to do things that you would not have to do if you had just stayed with your original design. And unfortunately, you're never going to find the completeness and the happiness and the contentment in pretending to be something you were never created to be. So that is just life. We have no say so over that whatsoever. It is up to us to align ourselves with God, creation, or intended for us, or for us to go along our own little path and try to make one for ourselves. But all paths lead back to God, and we have to answer for how we chose to spend our life at the end of the day. And so yeah, it doesn't matter. You are what God created you to be. And it is better for you to figure out what that is. You're going to find not only your contentment, your fulfillment, your purpose, your life is going to be much more effective. You're going to accomplish more when you do what you were created to do, as opposed to trying to make up something you were not created to do and then investing all your time and energy into that. Like, you're going against nature, because that's not your nature to do that. And so again, a lot of times we kind of decide who we think we are. And it's not always malicious. It's not always like, oh, you're trying to do this to be rebellious against God, or you're trying to go about your own way. A lot of the time we're just lost and we don't know. And so we're trying our best. with our eyes closed, navigating life, trying to figure out, okay, who am I? Where do I fit? What do I do? Stuff like that. And at some point, I feel like if you're really in that sincere search, it's going to lead you to God, because you're going to figure out that the path that you're going is not leading you to answers. It's not leading you to the things in your heart that you feel fulfilled by. And so at some point, it should kind of lead you to God. And then from there, God starts to kind of direct you more. Okay, this is who you are. That is who you are. So it's not always bad to try to find out who you are. I guess it becomes bad when the aim of doing that leads you away from God as opposed to towards God, because it should bring you towards God, because he is the only one with the real answer to who you are. So so we and then as a kid, you don't grow up with this mentality, like you do it subconsciously. So it's not like you grew up saying, oh, I'm trying to figure out who I am, let me go ask God. You just automatically start trying to figure out who you are. And then again, it comes to a point where you make the decision to kind of look for God in getting the answer to that question. So it's not always bad that you don't know who you are and you're trying to figure out who you are. That's just a normal process of life. We all go through it, and we subconsciously take our cues from society, about our parents, society, our family, our friends, about how to answer those questions. Unfortunately, a lot of the times that information is wrong, because we don't get our identity from what is around us. We get our identity from God. And then when God gives us our identity, we reflect that identity to what is around us. We don't get that identity. And see, this is the problem with the world. We do things backwards. So once we step outside of God's design, we start doing things in a backwards way, and then it causes a bunch of problems, because in God's design, we get our identity from him. It comes from him to us, and we manifest that into the world. But in our backward sin-filled nature, we get our identity from the world, and then we reflect that identity onto God. We do things very, very backwards. And it causes so many problems that, so that's a normal thing that we do. But it, again, is a testament to the fact that we are looking for something because we are supposed to have it. We're supposed to have identity. We're supposed to understand who we are. And, that's how God created us. So the issue comes in, because we are living in a broken world, is that a lot of the cues and messages that we get as kids, they are wrong. Not only wrong, but they're damaging a lot of the times. Most people that have issues as an adult, trauma comes from their childhood. Stuff happens from you in your childhood when you're vulnerable, when you don't understand and stuff like that. And it damages you. And what it damages is your perception of yourself. Because as it damages your perception of yourself, then you start manifesting these behaviors, these ideas, you start making choices based on this erroneous idea of who you are. And so that happens a lot. I know. So for example, for me, when I was a kid, I had a very dysfunctional home, abusive home. And so I grew up having these ideas about myself that wasn't valuable, that I was kind of like a worthless person. I actually remember as a kid concluding that I was unlovable, that something was wrong with me, that I was an unlovable person. I remember thinking that and deciding that in my head, like, oh, something's wrong with me, I'm unlovable, And from there, I started trying to make myself lovable. I started trying to figure out how to become a lovable person, because I really thought that something was wrong with me because of my environment. And so I grew up with that thinking. And of course, as you can imagine, it contributed to a lot of bad decisions. And God took me through a process. Once I came to God, because I realized I did not have the answers, and I wasn't happy, and that things were actually getting worse. And I finally came to God trying to get the answer to these questions. He began a process of kind of teaching me who I was. And it was not easy, because once you make up your mind who you think you are, it becomes rooted in your entire understanding of reality. And so for that to be removed and replaced with something else is a type of surgery that is almost difficult to explain, because I see it as a surgery. Like, so for example, if you need heart surgery, they have to open you up. They have to disconnect certain veins and reconnect. I mean, it can be very, very tedious, especially when you get into nerves and all that type of stuff. And God has to do that to us spiritually when we have the wrong ideas about stuff. All these different meticulous little things need to be disconnected and reconnected, and it's not easy. And the thing is that we have to be willing. Like, they can put you to sleep and do stuff to you without your permission. When it comes to your ideas and your beliefs, you have to be in cooperation. Nobody can put you to sleep and move your ideas around, and then you wake up with new ideas or beliefs. So you have to be in agreement. That is the only way that it can work, is if you are in agreement and you're willing and you're open to undergo the surgery to move some things around, because it cannot be moved around without your permission. So God has to take you through this process he took me through this process of not only learning who I was, but unlearning the bad things that I was taught, because those things were very difficult to let go, because they were so ingrained in my thought processes and all this other stuff that I believe, that it was like, a surgery. Like, okay, now they got to take this belief and I got to take this belief. And you're not, because it's like, if God says, well, you're not unworthy person. And I'm like, really? Are you sure? Like, I didn't even know I thought that about myself, honestly, for a very long time. And it was God who brought it to my attention that you're doing these things because you think that you're not worthy. And it's like, oh, okay, well, do you know you're worthy, right? And it's like, oh, really? Like, what does that mean? Like, it just goes through this whole, and why do I not believe that? What happened to make me think that and so it's a lot. It's really a lot, but it's really important that we get to understand who we are, to unlearn that bad stuff and learn who we are in Christ, because it makes a huge difference in how we live our lives based on what we think about ourselves and what we believe about ourselves, especially when it's aligned with the truth. Because again, it's one thing to believe something about yourself and it not be true, as opposed to believing something about yourself when it is true. It a completely different level of potential when you understand who you are and you kind of move along. I mean, when you understand who you are based on what God has said, and then you live that out, it unlocks a whole different level of living life. And so we have to really, understand who we are. And at the end of really, when it comes to all this traumatic stuff that can happen to us as kids to change our identity, this is the main thing the devil attacks. He attacks our identity because he knows that whatever we believe about ourselves is going to be the basis for how we live out our lives. So he is constantly trying to attack our identity. In the Garden of Eden, this is exactly what he did to Eve. He attacked her identity. Her identity was in God. She was being taken care of. She was loved. She was okay the way she was. And before he gave her the idea, she was fine with it. She had her man. They were in paradise. Like, she was fine. He put the idea in her head that something was wrong with her. That something was wrong with her because she did not have the type of knowledge that God had. And so because she wanted to be like God, which is normal because we were made in his image, so it's not abnormal to want to be like God. You just need to understand your place in that hierarchy, because no matter how much you want to be like God, you're still under God. So when you want to be like God, but now you want to be over God, then that's a problem. But if you want to be like God, under God, as a small God, you are on the right thinking when you understand that there's another God above your godness. Okay. So he gave her the idea that something was wrong with her. And what he did was made her question her identity. And when he made her question her identity, it was enough to kind of push her in a completely different direction, where at the time she had not lost her identity. He just made her question her identity, but him making her question her identity was what led to her losing her identity. And so he constantly attacks our identity and tries to make us believe things about ourselves That's not true, because as we believe those things, it's going to affect how we see God, how we live our life, who we listen to. I mean, it just affects everything else. And so we have to be really, really sure about who we are. And I don't want to say really, really sure, because sometimes I'm still not sure, but we have to grow in understanding who we are. And I can tell you, from the person that I used to be, who was broken, who was confused, who just really honestly, genuinely thought I did not have very much value, very, very, very miserable life, may I add, to gradually over the years, like I said, I've been a Christian for like 20 something years, gradually over the years, God removing those things from me and helping me to understand who I am in Him. I'm a totally different person. Like sometimes the person that I am now, the person I used to be, I feel like that person is a stranger. Like I don't know that person. Like I know she existed and I remember, but I don't feel a connection. Like I don't remember what it's like to be her, if that's for lack of a better word. Like it's kind of weird, honestly, but there's a disconnection. And so, and I know if at that time, if you had told me that I would become the person that I am today, even though I still have flaws, even though sometimes I still feel lost, even sometimes I still struggle with some things. If you had told me then that these years later I would become this type of person, I would not have believed it. I would not have believed it at all. It probably would have went in one ear and out the other ear, because it would have just been that non-existent to me that was even possible. And so God helped me to understand my worth, my value, my talents, my potential. He's even helped me to understand that even in those things where my weaknesses come from. So yeah, so I have these strengths, but those strengths also comes with some weaknesses. And but even in me understanding my weaknesses, I know how to better navigate my life, because I know what my weaknesses are and how to better navigate my relationships. And so he's really helped me to understand that. And so I do I completely understand it? No. Sometimes it still seems way above my thinking. And sometimes God might tell me stuff and I still struggle with it about myself. But I know I've come very, very far. Like so far that the only thing left for me to do is just continue to walk this journey and see where it leads. Because, I know if I stayed in the mentality that I had before, I would not be where I am now. I would not be content where I am now. I wouldn't be the mother that I am now. I wouldn't be the writer that I am now. I wouldn't be the coach. Like it's a lot of stuff that I know I would not have been able to reach if it wasn't for me getting to a point where I understood my identity better, where I understood my identity in a deeper way. So yeah, and so nowadays, especially with social media, because before I talked about like as we grow up, we get our cues from who we are from our environment. We get them from our parents, we get them from and mind you, your parents should point you towards your identity in God, but a lot of times parents point you towards their identity that it's an extension of themselves, but that's a whole different conversation. Maybe I'll do a post, a show about that. But anyway, so we get our identity from our environment. But now the environment has expanded because of social media, because of technology. So now people are trying to get a sense of who they are based on these huge, sometimes ridiculous expectations, because they have social media and they have people flaunting in front of their faces about who you are and who you should be and what you should have and what you shouldn't have and what you should take and what you should not take. And it's become a lot more, not only convoluted, but confusing. Like my younger kids come home and tell me some of the conversations that these kids are having nowadays in schools, and it shocks me. It genuinely shocks me. This is not something that was even thought of when I was a kid, but because our exposure has increased probably 20-fold, and everybody's walking around with tiny computers in their pockets to give them messages in their brains continuously about who they think they are. These younger kids to me are way more confused than I even was when I was growing up. And I was pretty confused, but now it's worse because now you have this unrealistic standard of where your life should be. And if it's not like this, then what is wrong with you? And it just becomes much more confusing. And I don't even want to get into the gay, the trans, and all this type of stuff. That stuff is getting out of control. Like, it's just getting so out of control that people are trying to identify as everything. You have like white people who are saying they identify as black. I've even heard of, if you haven't heard of this, this might shock you. I've even heard of adults identifying as kids, and they want to go to school with kids, and they want to be around kids, and they want to pretend like they're kids because they identify as kids. Like, it's insane. I've heard of people identifying as, this is really weird, like disabled people. So they feel like their limbs are not their limbs. So they deform their own limbs and cut them off and whatever, because they identify as somebody who should not have limbs. Like, it's not funny, but I don't understand it. Like, honestly. And it's scary because you see the mentality of humanity is declining. It's not funny. I'm sorry for laughing. It's not funny. But people are going crazy because they are confused about who they are. It goes back to what I said. People are confused about who they are. And so they're walking around like trying to figure out, trying to do this, trying to make the world match what they believe about themselves. And to a certain point, it becomes a little bit insane. But again, it goes back to us understanding who we are from our creator, not us trying to make up ideas about who we think we are and trying to live that out, as opposed to actually going to the source, the person, the being who made us, and asking him, what did you make me for? What am I here for? Who am I? But we try to figure out these things ourselves, and it becomes a huge mess. And again, with technology, it's just taken on a totally and completely different level. Hey, my cousin is on here. Hey, Stacy. Yes, it's foolishness. It's insane. So she said that, what's going on now is foolishness. And it really is. Like, it's scary to me. And it's like when you see the Bible and how it talks about the last days, especially from 20, 30, 40 years ago, you have your ideas about, okay, well, what does these things mean? What does it mean to be lovers of yourself? Like, that's just a statement. But now you see it in action. What it means to be lover of yourself is like, everything is about you. Like, you're choosing your identity and you're saying who you are. And you're making up stuff like, this is what it looks like played out to be a lover of yourself. Like, you only care about yourself, which, I mean, it goes in a lot of different directions. But basically, the Bible talks about how we're getting to these days where this type of stuff is happening. And it's crazy to me. It's really crazy. And I feel like, where is the world going to be in the next 10 or 20 years? Like, it's kind of scary, So anyway, and it's more scary. I will say this, it's more scary when you're trying to raise kids in this, because their minds are already vulnerable. And so you're trying to constantly protect their minds. You can't be around them 24/7. Because you also need to eat and take a bath and take care of yourself. So you're constantly having to try to remove any bad ideas that they're getting in their minds about who they are. And it's a full-time, overtime, super time job that is really too much for one human being to do, which is why, going back to what I said in the beginning, we have to rely on God, because it's really kind of too much for us to try to do on our own. We cannot make up our identity on our own. We cannot protect our kids on our own. Like, it's just a job that's too big for us, but it's meant to be too big for us so that we know that we need God. And so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here, because I can go on and on about this and go in a lot of different directions. But the overall point that I want to emphasize is how important it is to our identity, is to our lives and the choices that we make in our lives and how we live our lives. And we need to, really sit down and ask ourselves, who are we? I would even suggest making a list and saying who you are. Write down who you think you are based on, like, your talents, your gifts, what you want to do with your life. Who are you? And then leave another column to ask God, who are you? And he might take time, like, to answer, to reveal that to you over time. But start asking God who you are, And looking at his list compared to your list, then you know the changes that you need to make, because he is the only one who really knows who you are. And so we need to stop looking for our identity or our fulfillment in these frivolous, menial things, and really just go back to the source and start working on being who God created us to be. Because again, that's the only way you're going to find happiness. That's the only way you're going to find fulfillment. That's the only way you're going to fulfill your purpose. That's the only way you're going to have a meaningful life. And that's the only way you're going to find and connect to God. So that's it about identity. It's just a really, really condensed kind of topic, just to kind of get you thinking about some things, and start looking for yourself and who created you, and not all these other things. But yeah, that's it. So tune in again next week. My show time is changing from 12:30 to 11 a.m. On Fridays. You make sure you tune in. Make sure you share my content. If you have any questions, any comments, any topics that you would like for me to address, make sure you send me those. And be sure to check out my class. My writing class is coming up next week on September 14th. Again, share with anybody who you think might be interested in writing a book. It's coming up on the 14th, and there's more information about that on my page. So that's it, you guys. Thank you for tuning in. I will post my new topic for next week by Monday, and then I hope to see you then. So thank you so much. Be blessed. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Bye.